Dusty's last stand. The envelope possessed an unwarranted heft. Dusty Rivers recognized the bank's precise, unwavering typeface even before his gaze dropped to the return address. First National. The hammer blow he'd anticipated had finally fallen. He'd wrestled with this inevitability, a cold dread settling deep in his belly despite his efforts. On the porch, the sun already a brutal force, he tore open the missive. The paper whispered a dry, rustling sound, each syllable amplified in the stillness. He skimmed the legal jargon, the once impersonal phrases now twisted into a personal affront. Foreclosure. Final notice. Auction date. In stark black and white. The air caught in his throat, tangible and painful. This was it. The sacrifices, the grueling labor, the desperate pleas, all amounted to nothing. Stepping off the porch and toward his withered fields, each footfall on the parched earth was a gritty accusation, a physical manifestation of the drought's relentless grip. What had once been a lush tapestry of pasture now resembled a wasteland of cracked clay and stubborn weeds. Even the usually resilient mesquites seemed defeated, their branches heavy with listless leaves. He halted at the rusted fence, his fingers tracing the coarse wire. His gaze swept the horizon, a panorama of broken promises and diminished hopes. This wasn't just land. It was interwoven with his very being. His grandfather had broken this soil, wresting a livelihood from its unyielding embrace. His father had persisted through hardship and misfortune. It was his sacred duty to preserve that legacy. A memory surfaced, a much younger Dusty, barely peeking over the saddle, riding beside his father. The scent of damp earth after a rare downpour, the kiss of the sun on his cheeks, the pride reflected in his father's eyes as he witnessed his son's first successful roping. He could almost hear the man's gravelly voice. "This land's yours now, son. Treat her with respect." He tried, hadn't he? God, how he tried. A hawk's lonely cry echoed across the plains, slicing through the stillness. Dusty shaded his eyes, watching the birds' effortless dance in the sky. Freedom, a sensation he hadn't known in what seemed like an age. He continued into the field, brittle stalks crunching under his boots. He stopped at the weathered well, a monument to his grandfather's tenacity, now a dry, gaping maw, an emblem of the ranch's descent. He peered into its dark depths, a hollow echo answering his silent despair. He recalled a day when Lily, his daughter, had lost her cherished doll down that well. He'd toiled for hours, improvising a makeshift retrieval system, finally drawing the muddy toy back into the light. Lily's joyful shriek, her tight embrace. Where was she now? Lost in the sprawl of the city, pursuing dreams he could no longer nurture. He'd yearned for her to stay, to share in this life, but he couldn't fault her departure. He had failed her, too. He sank onto a sun-scorched rock, the weight of his failures a crushing burden. What avenues remained? Liquidate the remaining cattle? The proceeds would barely scratch the surface of his debt. Plead for assistance from Jedediah, his brother? He knew Jedediah was struggling, barely maintaining his own foothold. He could vanish, cut his losses, and seek a fresh start elsewhere, perhaps as a hired hand. But the thought was repugnant. Abandoning this legacy, watching strangers dismantle his family's heritage, it would be akin to self-mutilation. Dusty squeezed his eyes shut, the sun a burning brand against his eyelids. Sarah's face bloomed in his mind, her gentle smile, the crinkles around her eyes when she laughed, a light in his life he never thought he'd know again. Guilt surged. He'd promised her a secure future, a home. Now, he was on the precipice of losing it all. He blinked, the harsh landscape swimming before him, blurred by the threat of tears. He had to act. He wouldn't surrender without resistance. But how? The auction. The word sparked an idea, however faint. He must find a way to avert it. But how? He rose, a spark of defiance flickering in his chest. They wouldn't seize his birthright. He wouldn't allow his family's story to end. He might be brought low, but he wasn't defeated. Not yet. He turned back toward the house, each step infused with newfound purpose, a fragile plan taking shape. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. But it was his only play, and Dusty Rivers wouldn't concede defeat without a fight. But he knew this simple rancher would die with honor and would not be forgotten. A whisper by the river. The sun, a molten coin sinking into the west, painted the sky in hues of fire as Dusty steered Grit, his faithful horse, toward the river's embrace. The bank's foreclosure notice clung to him like a persistent shadow, yet the steady cadence of Grit's hooves on the hard-packed ground offered a fragile comfort. He craved the river, its ageless susurrus, its quietude, to quell the turmoil within. Dismounting at his favored spot, a broad curve in the waterway embraced by sheltering cottonwoods, he noted the air, thick with loam and the scent of willow, carried a subtle discord. A faint, almost inaudible sound, like a finch ensnared, drew him onward. Pushing through a thicket of wild roses, their crimson blooms fading at the edges, he found her. Clara May Beaumont lay nestled near the lapping water, partially obscured by reeds. The vitality usually radiating from her features had vanished, replaced by a pallid fragility. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. Clara, kneeling beside her, Dusty felt his pulse quicken with alarm. Her eyelids fluttered open, the familiar warmth in her gaze clouded by suffering. Dusty, her voice a breathy sigh, barely carried on the evening breeze. So, terribly alone, he touched her brow. It was slick with a chilling sweat. Fear, a cold fist, clenched in his gut. He'd witnessed death too often, recognized its icy grip. "Hush, Clara. I'll get you home." He tried to lift her, but her frame was strangely weighty, devoid of resistance. "No." A dry, racking cough escaped her lips. Too late for that. He gently brushed a stray wisp of hair from her face, his hand trembling slightly. The dying sunlight cast elongated, grotesque shadows that mimicked spectral figures dancing around them. "Don't say such things, Clara. Don't you dare." She looked at him, clarity shining through her weakening state. "Dusty, you possess a good heart." Her words resonated with unanticipated power. Good? He felt anything but. A failure, drowning in debt and haunted by ghosts. Yet here she lay, on the precipice, offering him solace. A wave of emotion surged through him, pity, sorrow, and something deeper, a primal urge to safeguard her, to shield her from the solitude that threatened to engulf her entirely. He recalled the foreclosure, the imminent auction, the potential loss of everything he cherished. He remembered Sarah's laughter, her steadfast belief in him. And now Clara, vulnerable and isolated, murmuring of loneliness at the river's edge. A thought, audacious and impulsive, burgeoned in his mind, fueled by desperation, compassion, and perhaps a nascent ember of hope. He clasped her hand, his rough fingers closing around her delicate ones. The river chuckled beside them, an impassive observer. "Clara," he started, his voice strained with feeling. "Clara, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Her eyes widened, surprise momentarily eclipsing the pain. A weak, tremulous attempt at a smile touched her lips. "Mary, you," he affirmed with a nod, his grip tightening on her hand. "Yes, become my wife. Now, I don't want you to endure this final journey on your own." Silence hung heavy between them, punctuated only by the whisper of leaves and the river's endless song. The last golden tendrils of sunlight vanished, enveloping them in gathering dusk. He watched her, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm, unsure of her response. She might dismiss his proposition as madness. Finally, she spoke, her voice a mere thread. "Why, Dusty?" He swallowed, searching for the right words. Because no one should face death alone. Because I, too, am desperately in need of someone. The raw truth tumbled from his mouth. He'd been adrift since Sarah's passing, waging a losing war with the world. Perhaps this, against all odds, could deliver him from his own desolation as well. Her eyes closed, her face etched with exhaustion. He feared she had succumbed to unconsciousness, but then she breathed, "Yes." A single word, a solitary syllable, that altered everything. The enormity of his impulsive proposal crashed down, overwhelming and weighty. He was offering himself to a dying woman. He, a man teetering on the brink of ruin, was on the verge of embracing another responsibility, another burden. Yet, as he gazed at Clara, her expression tranquil in the dwindling light, he knew there was no turning back. He had spoken a vow, born of desperation and compassion, and he would honor it. He would not abandon her to the river, nor to the silence of death. A riverbank wedding. The sun, a molten coin in the sky, beat down on them as Dusty settled Clara May against a gnarled willow. The river chuckled and gurgled, oblivious to the gravity of the moment. He'd taken off his worn denim jacket and folded it beneath her head, trying to make her as comfortable as possible on the rough riverbank. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale a faint, fluttering sigh. He knelt beside her, his hand hovering over hers, not quite touching. He didn't know what to say, how to fill the silence that pressed down on them with the weight of unspoken truths. He'd acted on impulse, a desperate, foolish impulse. But now, faced with the reality of it, he felt a strange calm settle over him. He'd made a promise. He'd given his word. A shadow fell across them. Dusty looked up, squinting against the glare. A man stood there, tall and lean, wearing a dusty black suit and a worn-out Stetson. He carried a battered leather satchel slung over his shoulder. "Afternoon," the man said, his voice a low rumble. "Didn't mean to intrude. Just passing through. Name's Reverend Elijah. See you folks are occupied." Dusty rose, his throat suddenly tight. "Reverend," he acknowledged, tipping his hat. We are. Sort of." He gestured awkwardly towards Clara May, then back at the preacher. "It's complicated." Reverend Elijah's eyes, the color of river stones, studied them both, taking in Clara May's pallor, Dusty's drawn face. He didn't say anything, just waited. Dusty took a deep breath. "I asked her to marry me, just now, and she said yes." The Reverend's gaze shifted back to Clara May, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "And the lady's agreeable?" Clara May stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. She focused on the Reverend, a faint smile gracing her lips. "I am," she whispered, her voice thin and reedy. "More than agreeable." Reverend Elijah nodded slowly. "Well now," he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "I reckon that's something good, even out here by the river." He paused. "You got a ring?" Dusty's heart sank. He hadn't thought that far ahead. "No, sir, I don't." Clara May reached up, her frail hand finding his. She pressed something into his palm. It was a small, silver band, tarnished with age. "My mother's," she breathed, "for safekeeping." "Now," Dusty swallowed hard, his eyes stinging. He took the ring, the metal cool against his skin. Reverend Elijah cleared his throat. "All right then, let's not waste any time. The Lord works in mysterious ways, and he's brought us all together here today." He opened his satchel and pulled out a small, warm Bible. The leather was cracked and faded, the pages dog-eared and stained. He began to speak, his voice gaining strength and resonance as he recited the familiar words. The sun beat down on them. The river whispered its ancient song, and the wind rustled through the willow branches like a chorus of unseen witnesses. Dusty held Clara May's hand, her fingers papery and fragile in his. He looked into her eyes, seeing a flicker of peace there, a quiet acceptance. He felt a responsibility settle upon him, heavy and real. When came time for the vows, Clara May's voice was barely audible. Dusty repeated his own, his voice thick with emotion. Reverend Elijah looked at them, his eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Dusty leaned down and gently brushed his lips against Clara May's forehead. It was a chaste kiss, a tender promise. "Well now," Reverend Elijah said, closing his Bible, "that's that. May the Lord bless this union." He looked at Dusty. "You've taken on a big responsibility, son. Don't you forget it." He nodded towards Clara May. "Take care of her. Dusty met his gaze, his jaw set. I will, Reverend. I promise you I will. The Reverend smiled faintly, a genuine, heartfelt smile. I believe you will. He gathered his satchel. I best be on my way. Got a long road ahead. He tipped his hat. Godspeed to you both. And then he was gone, disappearing as quickly and quietly as he had appeared, leaving Dusty and Clara May alone by the river, bound together by promise, a silver ring, and the weight of what was to come. The river flowed on, indifferent to their fate, carrying its secrets downstream. The unexpected bloom. The river, which had witnessed Clara May's near departure, now seemed to whisper secrets of her return. Each day, a sliver more color returned to her face, a fragile bloom pushing through stubbornly barren earth. Dusty watched, a silent sentinel, as she navigated the treacherous currents of her own body. The first sign had been a fluttering of her eyelids, followed by a whisper, barely audible, of water. Dusty had practically leaped to fill the dipper, holding it to her lips as she sipped, her throat working with the effort. Then, a day later, she'd managed to sit up, propped against the pillows he'd plumped with a desperate, clumsy tenderness. Now, a week after the riverside ceremony, Clara May could manage a few steps, clinging to Dusty's arm like a vine seeking purchase. Easy now, he'd murmur, his calloused hand firm around her frail one. He felt an unfamiliar protectiveness, a raw tenderness that both warmed and unsettled him. He was a caretaker now, a husband, not just Dusty Rivers, the rancher teetering on the edge of ruin. Dusty. Her voice was a dry leaf rustling in the wind. Right here, Clara May. He knelt beside her chair, his gaze searching hers. Thank you, she said, her eyes still too large for her face, holding a depth of something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, yes, but also something akin to understanding. He shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. Just doing what needs doing. He busied himself stirring the broth he'd been simmering, the savory scent filling the small cabin. He learned to cook of all things. Not fancy, just sustaining. He found a strange rhythm in the task, a quiet comfort in providing. The change in Clara May hadn't gone unnoticed. The town, starved for distraction, buzzed with speculation. Whispers followed Dusty like a shadow. Did you hear? Clara May's up and walking. Some say that Reverend was an angel in disguise. A dying woman married? What kind of fool does that? Salty old Mrs. Gable at the general store had been particularly vocal, her pronouncements delivered with the unwavering certainty of a seasoned gossip. Dusty ignored them as best he could. Let them talk. He had a ranch to save, a wife to care for. The bank was still breathing down his neck. The foreclosure notice a constant, looming threat. But for the first time in months, a flicker of hope ignited within him. Maybe, just maybe, things could turn around. One afternoon, while Clara May rested, Dusty went out to mend a section of fence. The sun beat down on his back as he hammered, sweat stinging his eyes. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't hear Jedediah Bell, the town blacksmith, approach. Rivers, Jedediah called out, his voice gruff. Dusty straightened, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. Bell. Jedediah shifted his weight, his gaze fixed on the ground. Heard about you and Clara May. Dusty tensed, bracing himself for the inevitable judgment. Jedediah cleared his throat. My wife, Martha, she used to visit Clara May, said she was a good woman. He looked up, his eyes meeting Dusty's. Said she deserved better. Dusty swallowed, surprised by the blacksmith's unexpected words. She's getting better, he said, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. Jedediah nodded slowly. That's good. Real good. He paused. Say, Rivers, I got a heifer that needs tending. Broke her leg. Can't afford the vet. You still got that knack with animals? Dusty stared at him, a glimmer of understanding dawning. An offering. A small, hesitant olive branch extended from a town that had largely written him off. I can take a look, he said, his voice rough with emotion. As Dusty walked back to the cabin that evening, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, he saw Clara May sitting on the porch, bathed in the warm light. She was watching the river, her face serene. He sat beside her, the silence stretching between them, comfortable and companionable. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said softly, her gaze fixed on the water. "It is," Dusty agreed, but he wasn't looking at the river. He was looking at Clara May, at the unexpected bloom that had taken root in the most barren of landscapes. A bloom that gave him the strength to face the coming storms. Foreclosure's shadow. Before the dust devils stirred up by Jebediah's hasty departure had settled, the banker's sedan wheezed up Dusty's lane, a plume of exhaust briefly eclipsing the faded Rivers Ranch sign. Dusty, with Clara May's spectral presence beside him, her cane her only anchor, watched its approach from a porch. "Strength, Dusty," she urged, voice a gravelly rasp. "Let them see nothing." He gave a curt nod, his gut twisting tighter with each revolution of the sedan's tires. Henderson himself, the bank's VP, stepped out, his manicured shoes stirring up indignant puffs of ochre soil. "Rivers," Henderson greeted, his voice parched. "I presume you understand the situation." A dismissive wave encompassed the ranch house. "Fully aware I'm fighting for my land, yes," Dusty countered, meeting the man's cool gaze. Henderson's laugh was a dry, brittle sound. "Sentiments touching, Rivers, but we trade in certainties. Certainties like your arrears, which this union does nothing to alter." He flicked a glance at Clara May, his expression unreadable. "A piece of paper can't wish away debt." A tide of anger surged through Dusty. "It proves I'm not giving up. This is Clara May's home too now." "Her condition," Henderson lowered his voice, as if discussing a fragile artifact, "suggests that might only be temporary." He paused, letting the barb sink in. "We've revisited your file. The numbers don't lie. Foreclosure papers arrive next week. Advise you make arrangements." He spun on his heel, leaving Dusty to choke on the vehicle's crimson dust as it sped away. Clara May's cough was deep, wet, triggering alarm bells in Dusty's mind. He guided her inside, feeling the delicate weight of her frame. "He's right, isn't he?" she murmured, sinking into the armchair, sunlight illuminating the roadmap of wrinkles around her eyes. "It changes nothing in their book." Dusty knelt, taking her hand, its skin like ancient parchment. "We'll find a way, Clara May. We have to." "But what can we do, Dusty? We're stripped bare." A despair he hadn't heard before colored her voice, a sharp contrast to her earlier grit. "I don't want to be a weight." "Never," Dusty said, squeezing her hand. "You're family now, and family endures." Silence descended, heavy and suffocating, punctuated only by the grandfather clock's measured ticking, each tick a diminishing heartbeat. Then Clara May stirred. "There is something," she whispered. "My father spoke of it long ago, buried it deep." Dusty leaned closer, hope flaring anew. "What is it?" "A spring," she breathed, her gaze distant, lost in the past. "A hidden spring, somewhere on the land. Never runs dry," he said, "even in drought. He took me there as a child." Dusty's mind ignited. A constant water source could change everything. Nourish the land, sustain the stock, offer respite from the aridity. It was the key. "Do you recall its location?" he asked, his voice trembling. Clara May closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. "A general area, near the north pasture, by the old oak with a lightning scar. But it was so long ago." "We'll find it," Dusty declared, resolution hardening his tone. "We'll scour every inch of that pasture. A hidden spring, that has to be our answer." But looking at Clara May's pallid face, he knew the task was monumental, perhaps impossible. The specter of foreclosure, coupled with her failing health, felt like an insurmountable wall. The bank's shadow stretched long, threatening to smother the nascent flame of hope. The secret spring. The morning sun beat down mercilessly as Dusty helped Clara May onto the back of the old mule, Bess. Clara May, despite her frail appearance, held her head high, a determined glint in her faded blue eyes. "It's north, Dusty," she rasped, pointing with a trembling hand towards the rugged hills that formed the northern boundary of the ranch. "Past the Devil's Tooth," towards where the ravens nest. Dusty squinted. The Devil's Tooth was a jagged rock formation, a landmark he'd known since he was a boy. But the ravens' nesting grounds were further into territory he rarely ventured. "Are you sure, Clara May? That's rough country." "Positive," she insisted, her voice gaining strength. It's like a memory, Dusty. Fading, but there. We have to hurry." He secured her on Bess and mounted his own horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Buck. He'd packed light: water, some dried beef, a bedroll, and a rifle just in case. He knew this wasn't going to be a Sunday picnic. The land north of the Devil's Tooth was unforgiving, a maze of canyons and thorny brush. The first few hours were slow, grueling. Bess, though reliable, wasn't built for speed. Dusty led her carefully, picking the least treacherous path. Clara May clung to the mule's back, her silence punctuated by occasional gasps of pain. He stopped frequently, offering her sips of water and checking her pulse. Each time, it seemed fainter. As they climbed higher, the landscape transformed. Scrubby desert gave way to stunted pines and patches of wildflowers, stubbornly clinging to life in the harsh environment. The air grew cooler, crisper. Dusty could smell pine needles and damp earth, a welcome change from the dust and heat of the lower ranch. By late afternoon, they reached the Devil's Tooth, its jagged silhouette a stark reminder of the challenges ahead. Dusty dismounted and helped Clara May down. She leaned heavily on him, her breath coming in ragged bursts. "We need to rest," he said, concern etched on his face. Clara May shook her head, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "No, the ravens, I can almost see it." He looked where she was pointing. In the distance, he saw a cluster of dark shapes against the sky. The ravens' nests, clinging to the cliffs of a deep canyon. He knew that canyon. It was a treacherous place, filled with loose rock and sheer drops. As they continued, the terrain became even more difficult. The path narrowed, winding along the edge of the canyon. The air was thick with the stench of guano from the ravens' nests. Dusty kept a watchful eye, both on the path and on Clara May. He felt a growing sense of desperation. Time was running out, both for the ranch and for his wife. Suddenly, a gunshot shattered the silence. A bullet whizzed past Dusty's head, kicking up dust near Buck's hooves. The horse reared in panic, nearly throwing Dusty. "Down," he yelled, pushing Clara May behind a large boulder. He drew his rifle, scanning the surrounding hills. He spotted movement, a glint of sunlight off a rifle barrel, high on the ridge overlooking the canyon. It was Jed, his closest rival. Jed had been eyeing Dusty's land for years, waiting for him to fail. He'd made it clear he wouldn't hesitate to use any means necessary to get his hands on it. Dusty returned fire, sending a volley of shots towards the ridge. He knew he couldn't stay pinned down. They were exposed, vulnerable. "Stay here," he told Clara May, his voice tight with urgency. "I'm going to flush him out." He left her behind the boulder and moved quickly, using the terrain to his advantage. He circled around, hoping to flank Jed. As he moved, he heard another gunshot, followed by a cry of pain. He rushed back to Clara May. She was slumped against the boulder, clutching her arm. Blood seeped through her fingers. "He got me, Dusty," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He knew about the spring. Dusty felt a surge of anger, a burning rage that threatened to consume him. He'd come so close, only to be thwarted by Jed's greed and malice. He knelt beside Clara May, his heart heavy with despair. But then he noticed something, a faint trickle of water, seeping from the rocks near where she lay. The water was clear, cold, and tasted of minerals. It was coming from the ground, untouched. He looked up, his eyes filled with a glimmer of hope. The ravens circled overhead, their calls echoing through the canyon. He hadn't found the spring in time, but the spring had found them. Water found. The bullet's kiss on Clara May's arm, though superficial, sent a shockwave through her already weakened state, leaving her wan and shaky. Dusty tore a strip from his already ravaged shirt, cinching it tightly around the wound. "Hold that," he rumbled, his gaze hardening. Jed would answer for this. He risked a glance in the direction of Jed's retreat, then refocused on Clara May. Vengeance could be deferred. Survival demanded immediacy. He eased her onto Bess's back, wincing at her stifled cry. "Easy now. We're getting you to that water." The ascent crawled by. Dusty guided Bess with painstaking care, picking the most forgiving route possible. Each stir of leaves, each snapping twig, ignited a fresh surge of tension. Jed was out there, a predator in the shadows. "Dusty," Clara May breathed, her voice a parched rasp. Maybe turning back. He halted, pivoting to face her. Pain etched her features, yet a spark of her former strength flickered in her eyes. "We're not retreating, Clara May. Not now. We're too close." He reached out, offering a comforting squeeze of her hand. "We're claiming that water and reminding Jed Beaumont he can't walk all over us." He nudged Bess onward, his senses heightened. His gaze snagged on disturbed earth, a metallic gleam half hidden beneath a displaced rock. Jed had attempted to bury a trap, a rudimentary pitfall bristling with sharpened stakes. Dusty deactivated it with careful precision, a mirthless smile gracing his lips. Jed's error, underestimation. He mistook them for helpless prey. The air grew crisp, scented with pine, after what stretched into an eternity. A faint murmur reached his ears, the sound of flowing water. He urged Bess faster, the old mare responding with surprising energy. There it was. Water. Not a mere trickle, not a damp patch, but a vibrant spring gushing from the rock face. Clear, cold water poured over the stones, collecting in a small pool before vanishing into the arid ground. Dusty stared, transfixed. It exceeded his wildest hopes. Clara May gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. "It's real," she managed, her voice trembling. Dusty helped her dismount, supporting her as she limped to the pool's edge. She cupped the frigid water in her palm, bringing it to her lips. A slow smile blossomed across her face. "Life," she breathed. Time was a luxury they couldn't afford. Jed would undoubtedly return. They needed to carry something back, a token, a promise. Dusty drew his canteen, filling it to the brim. He then employed his hat, repeatedly scooping and splashing water over Bess, allowing the mare to drink her fill. As they turned Bess back towards the ranch, a glint of sunlight caught his eye near the spring. He investigated, discovering a spent rifle casing. Jed's calling card. He pocketed the shell, a tangible piece of evidence. The return journey unfolded faster, fueled by hope and adrenaline. The sunset painted the sky in vibrant shades of crimson and gold as they crested the ridge overlooking the ranch. Dusty held the canteen aloft, the water catching the fading light. He spotted figures gathered near the house, their faces etched with anxiety. As they approached, he heard the muffled sounds of voices, the mournful lowing of cattle, the desperate cries of sheep. The land was scorched, the animals desperate. He spurred Bess into a jog, shouting as he neared. "Water! I've got water!" A collective cheer erupted from the gathering, who surged toward them, faces illuminated with renewed hope. Dusty dismounted, his legs unsteady with fatigue. He extended the canteen to Martha, a young woman whose children were particularly vulnerable. "Here," he rasped, "give this to the little ones." Martha accepted the canteen, tears welling in her eyes. "Dusty, we thought it was all lost." He surveyed the scene, the anxious faces, the barren landscape, the suffering animals. He knew this was only a beginning, a skirmish won in a larger battle. They had located the spring, but a long struggle lay ahead. Yet for the moment it sufficed. Clara May, supported by Dusty's arm, offered a weak smile. "We did it, Dusty." He looked at her, at the woman who had risked everything for him, his ranch, this community. He squeezed her hand. "We did it together, Clara May." The small quantity of water was carefully measured and distributed, each drop precious. Dusty realized its symbolic value outweighed its volume. It was a demonstration of their resilience, a flicker of hope in the face of despair. That night, beneath a canopy of brilliant stars, Dusty sat with Clara May on the porch, listening to the soft hum of the ranch. It was the sound of hope taking root, the sound of life returning. Jed would return, of that he was certain, but they would be ready. They had found water, and they had each other, a thriving oasis. The desert, once a cruel mistress, now blushed with vibrant green. Dusty surveyed the transformed landscape, a choked sob caught in his throat. Rows of young cornstalks reached eagerly for the sun, their leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Watermelons, plump and striped, nestled amongst sprawling vines. He could almost taste the sweetness, a far cry from the dust and despair that had clung to this land just weeks ago. The spring, their secret weapon, had worked miracles. Dusty had diverted its flow into carefully constructed irrigation channels, coaxing life back into the parched earth. He'd worked dawn till dusk, his hands raw and calloused, fueled by a hope he hadn't known he possessed. Clara May, though still frail, directed operations from the porch, her eyes shining with a newfound vitality. Dusty, her voice, though thin, carried across the field. "Mr. Abernathy is here." Dusty wiped the sweat from his brow and strode towards the house, his boots sinking slightly into the now moist earth. Mr. Abernathy, the bank manager, stood awkwardly by the porch swing, his usual stern expression replaced with something akin to awe. "Rivers," Abernathy began, clearing his throat. I hardly recognize the place. Word travels fast, you know, especially when it involves miracles." He gestured vaguely towards the flourishing fields. "The bank has been re-evaluating your loan situation." Dusty crossed his arms, a cynical smile playing on his lips. "Re-evaluating, huh? I reckon that means you see a profit now." Abernathy shifted uncomfortably. "Let's just say your endeavors have exceeded expectations. We're prepared to withdraw the foreclosure notice, Mr. Rivers, and perhaps even discuss a line of credit for expansion." Dusty's smile widened. "Expansion, you say? Well, now, that's mighty generous of you, Mr. Abernathy. Mighty generous indeed." He looked over at Clara May, a silent understanding passing between them. They had won this battle, at least for now. As Abernathy departed, promising to send over the paperwork, Clara May beckoned Dusty to sit beside her. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the revitalized ranch. "You did it, Dusty," she said softly, her hand reaching out to clasp his. "You saved us all." Dusty squeezed her hand, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We did it, Clara May. We did it together." The following weeks were a blur of activity. The harvest was bountiful, the watermelons fetching a good price at the market in town. Neighbors, initially skeptical, now flocked to Dusty for advice and, more importantly, for water. The spring, it seemed, had enough to share. One evening, as they sat on the porch, sipping lemonade, Clara May began to speak of things she had never mentioned before. Before Beaumont Ranch, before all this, she gestured around her, "I was a businesswoman. A good one, too." Dusty raised an eyebrow, surprised. He'd always assumed she was just a rancher's wife, a woman worn down by years of hardship. "I ran a textile mill in Atlanta," she continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "Made a decent fortune, too. But then," her voice trailed off, a shadow passing over her face. "Then my husband, bless his soul, got sick, and everything fell apart. I sold the mill to pay for his treatment, but it wasn't enough. After he passed, I needed a fresh start." She looked at Dusty, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "I came out here, bought this ranch, hoping to find peace. But peace is a fickle thing, isn't it? Always seems to elude you when you need it most." Dusty nodded, understanding etching itself onto his face. He knew a thing or two about elusive peace. "So, you know about running a business, then?" Clara May smiled, a hint of her former self flashing through. "Honey, I could run circles around most of those fellas in town. Don't let this old face fool you. I've got plans, Dusty. Big plans." Dusty leaned back in his chair, a grin spreading across his face. Big plans. He liked the sound of that. Maybe, just maybe, this unlikely partnership was more than just a marriage of convenience. Maybe it was the beginning of something truly extraordinary. Love's second chance. Clara May, no longer confined to her bed, walked the porch swing with a newfound spring in her step, her laughter echoing like wind chimes in the gentle breeze. The color had returned to her cheeks. Her eyes sparkled with a mischievous glint, and the frailty that had defined her was replaced by a quiet strength. She'd spend her mornings tending to the small garden she'd started near the house, coaxing life from the parched earth, a mirror of her own resurrection. Dusty, watching her from the doorway, felt a warmth bloom in his chest, a feeling unfamiliar yet deeply comforting. He remembered the day he'd proposed, a desperate act born of pity and a sliver of hope. Now, looking at Clara May, vibrant and alive, he realized that something profound had taken root between them. "Penny for your thoughts, Dusty Rivers," Clara May called out, her voice laced with amusement. He ambled over, leaning against the porch railing. "Just admiring the view," he said, nodding towards the flourishing garden. "And the gardener." She chuckled, a melodic sound that made his heart skip a beat. "That garden wouldn't be here if it weren't for you in that spring. I always knew it was there, but I lacked the strength to do anything about it." He shrugged, suddenly shy. "It was nothing, Clara May, just doing what needed to be done." "It was everything, Dusty. You gave me back my life, my home, and, well, everything." She looked away, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon, a blush creeping up her neck. He reached out, gently taking her hand. Her skin was soft, surprisingly strong. "You gave me something too, Clara May. A purpose, something to fight for." He paused, searching for the right words. "Before you, I was just drifting, waiting for the inevitable." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sound the gentle creaking of the porch swing and the chirping of crickets in the distance. "Remember when you told Abernathy you were a businesswoman?" Dusty asked, breaking the silence. Clara May smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Indeed. Beaumont Imports, at your service. Though I haven't been at your service for quite some time." "Imports?" Dusty raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Various commodities. Coffee, spices, textiles. I traveled the world, negotiated deals, built a small empire." "Why'd you stop?" Her smile faded slightly. "The travel became too much. I grew tired of the constant movement, the cutthroat competition. I wanted a home, a place to settle down. But things didn't quite work out that way." Dusty squeezed her hand. "Well, you got a home now, Clara May, and I reckon we could use a little bit of that business savvy around here." Clara May's eyes lit up. "Oh, Dusty, I have so many ideas. We could expand the herd, invest in new equipment, maybe even start a line of locally sourced products. Jams, jellies, maybe even beauty products, using the honey from our own hives." Dusty grinned, captivated by her enthusiasm. "Sounds like you've been giving this some thought." "Every waking moment," she admitted, her voice filled with excitement. "But only if you're willing, Dusty. This is your ranch, after all." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just the woman he had married out of necessity, but a partner, a friend, a woman he was starting to love. "It's our ranch, Clara May, and I can't think of anyone I'd rather build a future with." Clara May's eyes welled up with tears, but this time they were tears of joy. She leaned in and kissed him, a soft, tender kiss that spoke volumes. It was a kiss of gratitude, of friendship, and, yes, of love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Dusty and Clara May stood on the porch, hand in hand, their ranch bathed in the golden light. The fields, once barren and lifeless, were now a sea of green, a testament to their resilience and determination. The foreclosure notice was a distant memory, replaced by a future filled with hope and promise. They had taken a chance, a leap of faith, and found something truly extraordinary in the most unexpected of places, a love born from kindness, nurtured by shared hardship, and destined to bloom for years to come. The second chance they both desperately needed had arrived, not in the form of a miracle, but in each other.